Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns and this is part 2 of my 2-part deep dive into all things base building and crafting. Part 1 really lays the foundations with a full review of the crafting system envisaged by CIG and how it feeds into the mechanics of base construction. So if you haven't seen that part yet, I would recommend starting there. I'll pop a link down in the video description below. If you've already seen that, then get ready, because in this episode we're going to be getting stuck into what will probably become the ultimate endgame goal for player orgs, space stations. So if this sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. I've got to admit, as someone who has spent thousands of hours in the survival genre, I have a special love for all things crafting and building related. So try as I might, a little bit of my personal bias might slip into my commentary on this subject. Still, I truly believe that well-defined crafting and building / territorial control systems are massively important to the longevity of Star Citizen as an MMORPG. Firstly, they provide meaningful endgame goals. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy running missions, cracking rocks just for the fun of it, and using the current game as a really cool sandbox. But long term, we need cash and resource sinks beyond buying another ship. And we need motivations to play, to work together, and to fight against one another that are altogether more meaningful and have a visible impact on the game world. Secondly, I think the system that is proposed is a really good one for encouraging interaction between players. And one of the things that has always attracted me to SC is that the devs truly seem to have the massively multiplayer at the heart of what they're building. Even if you prefer to play the game solo, the proposed systems will reward you for getting involved with other people. Whether that's trading in high quality materials that you've mined, acquiring blueprints, swapping advanced crafted items, or as we'll see in this video, taking advantage of the services offered by player built space stations. Whereas if you do want to get involved in a player org, then these same systems will reward you for doing so, and allow you to either focus on becoming the best within a certain niche, or take a diversified approach, covering many different aspects of the game in pursuit of a common goal. Before we dive into space stations though, I want to take full advantage of this being a two-parter, and of the building and crafting Q&A recently having aired, just to home in on some clarity that we got concerning land claims. I mentioned in the last episode that land claim beacons had previously been sold packaged with the CO Pioneer, and as a standalone item for a short window. But that the Pioneer is now no longer being sold with a beacon, and CIG have gone pretty quiet at this year's CitCon about the whole beacon system itself. And since the question was put very directly to the devs and we got a straight answer, I think it's worth taking a quick detour to look at it now. Essentially, the beacons that are already out there do not have no value. But the land claiming system has been updated, so they'll no longer really be a thing. Instead, you'll simply claim land via the build menu of your construction vehicle. When in surveying mode, you'll have the option to claim land, either as a prospecting plot, a smaller but cheaper way to claim the land, aimed at those wishing to exploit a certain resource that they've located underground, or as a larger, higher cost area, suitable for building all types of things. Claiming land within UEE space will involve an initial outlay of credits, paid directly via the build menu. If you own a land claim beacon within your hangar as a paid-for-cash item, this will essentially become a free claim voucher, allowing you to claim your plot without paying that initial fee. Regardless of how you claim, by paying or by using a beacon, you'll then be subject to ongoing taxes on the land, and should you fail to maintain these payments, your base will lose protection. Others will be able to come along and loot it and claim the land that you've lapsed on. The devs on the show, and Jared, were keen to stress that this is their current thinking on the subject, and that as with all things, it is subject to change if for gameplay reasons they come up with something better. But it should provide some reassurance to those people who've paid hard currency for land claims to date. Some factors remain to be seen. How much is land going to cost, for instance, will be a key factor in determining the actual value of the land claim beacons. However, I would say that they are a slightly less of an advantage compared with the old system, where they were a physical item, since a player starting without a beacon now doesn't have that added hurdle of going to purchase that said physical item. They just need to get enough cash together to pay their claim and cover taxes on the land. However, I personally do hope that CIG takes some steps to avoid prepaid land claims becoming an issue for the game. A big land rush is always a really exciting time in an MMO, with loads of competition over who gets the prime spots for building their base. And my concern is that if on day one some players can be out there planting flags while others are scrabbling to get the cash together for a claim, it's going to turn into a bit of a snowballing advantage for those with the claims at outset. To me, as I've said before, the best solution is to make it so that land claiming is not a thing on day one of Star Citizen 1.0 going live. Give things a couple of weeks or months to settle in, and for players to build up their wallets a little bit, then unleash an epic land grab on a slightly more level playing field. Still, I think there's plenty of smart folks working on this, and it's undoubtedly a factor that they will consider. But with that slight detour out of the way, it's time to start getting into the meat of this video, player-owned space stations. I was lucky enough to go along in person to this year's CitCon, and honestly CIG did a great job of saving the very best till last in my opinion. Space stations provide an ultimate endgame goal for entire player orgs and alliances. A project so large and covering so many different game loops that it's unlikely to be achievable without depending on one another. And while I'll always wave a flag for solo players in the verse, I don't think that everything should be within reach of an individual player. And I'm strongly of the belief that there need to be endgame goals that are only possible through teamwork and organisation. If the newly dropped aspects such as base building and space stations have got you thinking about an org, then please feel free to come and check out our Discord via the link in the video description. We very much operate a try before you buy model, with plenty of events open to our community members with no pressure to sign up to the org itself. Space stations are going to be vast modular structures that require fairly excessive amounts of resources to build. But where exactly do we start with them? Well, the first thing to do is to lay down a supply bay. This structure can only be built by the Pioneer, and it allows you to bring in the necessary resources to establish your starbase core. It's got an external cargo grid where you can deposit mats directly from your cargo ships. The actual starbase is then constructed by multiple drones which will feed off the deposited commodities, and following completion of the core, the supply bay will fully integrate into the space station. I think it is worth noting that once the supply bay is built, that's the only building ship specific task, and the rest of the construction is handled by the station itself. So while your org may not have access to a Pioneer, I'm 100% sure that this is going to become a contracted service where other players and orgs will provide you with one to lay down the core and transfer ownership over to you for a fee. Where you build your base is obviously going to be a huge deal. As we'll see, space stations are going to be massive investments, so you'll want there to be some form of strategic purpose to it. The devs were not 100% clear, please do let me know down in the comments if I missed something here, on how the lawless versus UEE systems are going to behave in regard to space stations. When it comes to ground bases, it was very clear that bases in UEE space would essentially be invulnerable to attack due to planetary shielding, while bases in the lawless systems, Pyro and Nyx at the launch of 1.0, wouldn't benefit from this by default. In the attack and defense sections of this presentation, Ian Leyland did make mention of the system warfare shielding, so I'd be really interested to see if space stations will follow the same laws as ground bases in this regard. Personally, just my own opinion, I don't think that space stations should have that degree of invulnerability at any point. Since unchecked by the threat of attack, there is a real danger that they could just negatively impact the balance of the game given their economic potential. Of course, in lawful areas, I would expect to see an element of NPC assistance if you come under siege, whereas in lawless systems you're undoubtedly on your own. One thing that did come out of the Q&A that did clarify something I wondered about is that you won't be limited to building stations around planets and moons, and you will have the option to build them way out in deep space or in asteroid belts like the Aran Halo. So there's definitely a lot of options for enterprising orgs who maybe want to build theirs in more remote, harder to reach areas to make it harder to siege, or maybe on the doorstep of a lot of resources, making for a perfect rest stop and attracting new miners. but assuming you manage to deposit the colossal amount of resources required, your drones will construct a space station core module. This is going to be the heart of your starbase, and while it allows for a fair degree of customization, it does come off the shelf with some standardized areas. The bridge is your command center. Here you'll manage all further construction of your space station, as well as your key resources, with systems for monitoring power and water supplies and requirements. There are also radar systems for monitoring what's going on in proximity of your station, helping you to identify possible inbound threats. The bridge is also where you set permissions for who can access what areas of your space station, with options to limit access based on organisation rank, or open certain areas up to players from outside of your org. So even if you are a solo player or a member of an org that maybe lacks the size and resources to build your own space station, chances are you'll be able to access and use services on someone else's. I thought it was particularly cool that Ian Leyland mentioned log access here as well, enabling org managers to track who has been and gone from the station, and see what they got up to while they were on board. A lot of people talk about SC in the context of almost EVE Online 2.0. One thing that I hope really differentiates it is more openness between players from different orgs, with large orgs encouraged not to always just wipe the floor with smaller ones and solo players. However, if that is to happen, then for security, we would need tools like this to log and monitor activity on board our space stations and our bases. A central transit system provides access between the various decks of the core. It's Star Citizen, so surely by now you understand that there are going to be elevators. However, it should be noted that everything in the station will have a 1-to-1 physical ratio, so the internal size will completely match the external area. The first stop and the point of entry for any visitors to your station will be the lobby, or observation deck. And the devs were keen to highlight here how this will all be completely customizable using decorative AR mode, and various decals that we saw in the previous video on base building. I'm really looking forward to seeing what players come up with using these features. The deck offers the opportunity to completely circumnavigate the whole station. Very first questions I got were from members of the Frontier racing team asking when they would be allowed to turn this into a racetrack. Then down into the bowels of the core, you'll enter the lower decks where you'll find the engineering deck and hangar decks. Engineering is set to become a much more hands-on gameplay system, with loops centered around maintaining and fine-tuning your ships. But the practice is set to expand into space stations and bases as well, with consistent repair and maintenance required to keep everything in peak condition. As standard, the core will come with a large hangar and 2 docking ports ready built, with empty slots for a further 2 medium hangars which you can add in post-construction. This might not seem like enough for your org's needs, but don't worry, this is just the space station core and there's going to be plenty of opportunities for further hangars down the line. The hangars themselves are connected by internal corridors large enough for ground vehicles, allowing for quick transit between hangars without the need for elevators. I particularly like this feature since it does open up a lot of use cases for ground vehicles which we're currently struggling to find. The hangars themselves are planned to have a good degree of customization, with empty modules that you can choose to fit with freight elevators or bays for smaller vehicles and ships. And hopefully this is the same modularity that we can expect from our personal hangars in the not too distant future. The control room, located on a mezzanine deck overlooking the hangar, will allow you full master control over the vehicle elevators and freight elevators. And this offers a really high ceiling for logistics-based gameplay, rewarding orgs and crews who can coordinate well with one another, ensuring that cargo's ready and waiting as a ship lands, and that teams are prepared to load and unload as soon as someone touches down. So all of that is just what comes with the core module as standard. However, it also lends itself to a really high degree of customization. While there's a predetermined internal network of corridors and roads, there are also a series of connectors. Bulkhead connectors are the internal version. They come in 3 sizes, tiers 1 to 3, which determine the size of room that you can attach off them. Within interior build mode, you can design and build out the internal areas of your space station. You'll need to deposit further resources in order to construct each module, and once they're completed, you'll be able to rename each room, giving you better control over how your station is mapped out. It is also worth bearing in mind that each new module that you add to the space station is going to increase those power and water cooling requirements, so you're going to need to always make sure you balance your needs against your resources. You'll be able to choose to either make generic empty rooms, which you can then customize using the decorative AR mode, or use as storage chambers. You'll also be able to install modules with distinct purposes, such as mess halls, infirmaries, habs, or generator rooms. And all of this will feed back into the blueprint system, and I would expect that we'll be able to acquire BPs for upgraded versions of each module, and maybe some extra special rare options. Shop modules will also let you set up commercial outlets, allowing you to sell your crafted wares either internally within your organisation or by opening parts of your station up to visitors, who can then acquire the things that they need. And this will turn space stations into commercial hubs, facilitating player-driven economies and encouraging players to travel around the verse, maybe to seek out your specific space station because of things that you craft and have for sale there. The exterior of the station though is a whole nother ballgame, with minor hardpoints dotted over the outside surface on the top, bottom and sides, allowing you to attach a variety of modules to the station, serving a variety of purposes. Some of these, like gas harvesters, can aid in resource generation, while others, like shields and turrets, help you defend your home. The core also comes with two major hardpoint connectors. These will allow you to add entire huge wings to your space station, expanding it out and providing additional levels of utility. The cargo wing provides you with a huge amount of added inventory capacity, with freight elevators and pads or docking facilities for a variety of ships. The refinery wing is something we've already seen in game at NPC stations, but provides facilities for refining mined resources. This will be particularly cool if you can base your space station in close proximity to a really good mining area. And the hangar wing will expand your landing capabilities, providing a variety of hangar sizes and docking collars. Obviously, all of this is very much at the concepting/grey box stage, but I really hope that with these wings we have a fair degree of customization options as we do with other aspects of the space stations, allowing orgs to plan out their stations to suit their needs. Maybe you want a cargo wing which has pads but not hangars, or maybe you want a hangar wing which primarily has storage for small and medium ships. All wings are connected by struts, which are much like the corridors of the station, fully traversable. I honestly can't wait for the space station Uber driver profession to be officially added to the list. The top and bottom of the core also have unique base expansion points, designed for two specific modules. The top one can be used to attach the crow's nest. Admittedly, this one seems to be a case of form over function, and while it provides unrivaled views out over the station and any planet or moon it's orbiting, the space is left largely empty, giving players an opportunity to purpose these how they see fit. Personally, I'll be taking suggestions from across FRCN as to how we put the first of these rooms to use. The lower of these unique expansion points allows you to construct the flight deck, perfect for housing your station's quick reaction force. It's primarily designed for a wing of fighters, but the hangar entrance and interior is big enough to handle ships like the Connie shown in the video. So definitely the large end of medium ships will be happy enough in here. Like the other hangars, there's an observation deck allowing for elevator master control, so you can organise rapid refitting of your combat ships if they're called into action. The flight deck module also has another 3 major hardpoint connectors, allowing you to expand more wings off this element of your station. To make your stations truly unique, you'll also be able to update them visually through the application of custom tints and decals that you can either earn in-game or make yourself, allowing you to add your org logo to the side of the station. I absolutely love this feature, but just as an aside, since this was also featured in a game called Atlas that I played quite extensively, I'll be interested to see what systems put in place to avoid this feature getting abused. I'll let you fill in the meat and 2 veg-sized blanks here, this is a family show after all. Space stations are obviously going to be a huge investment for organisations, and represent a massive fortified structure with huge economic advantages. But having one is also likely to put something of a target on your org's back. Thankfully, you can turn your station into a fortress, with plenty of external defence hardpoints, You'll also want to think about internal defences to protect against infiltration squads. These guys might seek to break in through entry points on the exterior and work their way inside. These infiltrators will be slowed down by having to hack bulkheads and elevators to gain access to certain areas. You may want to slow them down further with a variety of automated turrets, specialising in anti-vehicle or anti-personnel, as well as additional blast doors. Ultimately, your most heavily fortified choke points should be around your bridge, since should this fall to the enemy, they'll be able to gain control and access otherwise unhackable areas of your station. But there is of course one final, particularly exciting module that you can build within your station. And considering in this deep dive we've gone from crafting to base building to space stations, it's only right that we go full circle to crafting. Down planet side, we've seen ship fabrication hangars capable of building ships, but this is obviously going to be limited by what can make it into and out of atmosphere, and probably by pre-existing hangar size limitations. The dry dock is going to be capable of building even the largest capital ships in the game, the RSI Bengal carrier. This was the total showstopper of CitCon, and honestly, I've watched back the recordings and they don't do the cheer that went up at this scene justice. It was rather loud. The previous plan from CIG was that just a few Bengals would be found out in the wild in a derelict state, that it would be up to an org to find them and to repair them in order to use them. The option to craft your own is a far better solution to my mind, particularly if they make every aspect of it really hard to do and take a lot of people to accomplish. It's also massive when thinking about other capital ships, things like the Javelin or the Kraken, or even non-military ones like the Orion, when we do so in the context of the new crafting quality and tiers, allowing organisations to not only craft, but also upgrade their flagships and their top tier exploration and industrial vessels. The final shot of the presentation was also huge in that it confirmed the ability to link space station cores together, allowing for some truly massive structures to be dreamed up here, combining masses of hangars, refining, cargo terminals, as well as just having entire cores dedicated to certain gameplay loops like medical or combat divisions within one superstructure. From the outset with Star Citizen, I've been keen to build a multifaceted organisation, combining nearly all types of gameplay under one roof. And with aspects like space stations, base building and crafting, I think we're starting to really see how the game will reward players working together in this manner. While some orgs and their bases will undoubtedly lean heavily into one area of gameplay, you'll still be reliant on people who like doing other things. You can't have a combat base without the prerequisite industry to gather supplies and logistical support to get it on location, or without exploration-oriented players to find you the perfect location. High-level crafting, building, and ultimately the space stations will take players of all stripes working together to make a reality. And as I mentioned before, I truly hope that large orgs will figuratively and literally open the door for smaller orgs and solo players to experience some of this highest level endgame content, through the provision of services, trading quality goods, and crafted items, as well as by opening large bases and stations up for more social activities within the game world. If you enjoyed this deep dive and think I earned it, then the best way you can support the channel is by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. I do also have a Patreon, but honestly just by watching the vids you're already doing more than enough. And please do let me know what you think down in the comments section. I'm always happy to chat all things SE. But with all that said, I just want to say thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.